Thank you for joining this episode of 𝗂𝗐𝗄𝗄's podcast. I'm 𝗵𝗵𝗁, Head of Compliance and ESG at 𝗂𝗐𝗄𝗄. Really pleased to be joined today by Jaison Lobo, who's our compliance lead in India. Jaison and I are going to spend the next half an hour or so discussing disclosure-based legislation, how that looks in relation to some of the legislation we're seeing in Europe, also some of the issues that organisations are having in India with regards to reporting against BRSR, and also some of the areas that organisations can learn from other companies that Jaison's already working with to potentially ease that reporting burden. We'll also spend a short amount of time discussing greenwashing or the importance of accuracy of data that over the course of the next half an hour. So Jaison, great to have you for this episode. I guess it would be good, first of all, to get a bit of an understanding from yourself in terms of just broadly what BRSR is, and then also there's the development with BRSR Core, which obviously is something that you're working on a lot. So if you don't mind spending just a short amount of time just talking about that, giving us some kind of high-level insight into BRSR.
All right. Thank you, first of all, Adam. And with regards to BRSR, this is something that is rolled out by SEBI, wherein companies have to go ahead and report information related to their ESG and financial records, and it is mandated for the top 1,000 companies. So this framework basically is developed based on TCFD and other such frameworks, like keeping in mind the UN sustainability goals as well. It's quite a comprehensive framework, and it goes ahead and allows companies to go ahead and disclose information about what kind of practices they are undertaking when it comes to the environmental, social, or governance aspect, apart from and along with their financial information as well. And along with that, they've also rolled out something as a BRSR Core. That's a subset of BRSR that moreover focuses on the value chain information, and based on 9 principles that they have to go ahead and report on. To give a few examples is the greenhouse gas emissions, water intensity or water related information, or waste management, and such more disclosures, be it circularity, embracing circularity and other such aspects.
So BRSR, obviously some of the topics that you've mentioned there are not dissimilar to other legislation that we're seeing. So Jake and I on another podcast were talking about CSRD and requirements for reporting, biodiversity issues, wider environmental protection issues, and also elements of the company's own workforce as well as the human rights within the supply chain's workforce. So in terms of value chain, I know when you and I have spoken, sometimes there's a lack of clarity between what the legislation says and what it's asking of the value chain and that understanding. So I think we were discussing well-being, and you were saying that sometimes organisations don't always necessarily put well-being together with things that are potentially just kind of relatively standard employment practices. So pension, parental leave and things like that. Is that right?
Right. It's somewhat in that aspect wherein when you have to go ahead and disclose information that companies or the organizations are not comfortable doing so far, or maybe it was not a part of the requirement. Right now SEBI has rolled it in so that they have to go ahead and disclose that information, and it also gives a broader view, a broader aspect of what exactly the company is practicing and what all kind of information that they can go and disclose when it comes to managing the way how they manage the organization. This also helps investors and other interested parties to know how exactly is the company functioning, in what angle are they going ahead with, how sustainable would they be, and how exactly can you can look forward to when it comes to investing in such a company.
And I think in terms of, like, you and I have spoken about the granularity of the legislation, how do you think organisations, if I position CSRD with BRSR, I would say that CSRD is more straightforward. So although there are 1,200 data points that organisations may need to report against, actually the topics are broader whereas I understand from speaking to you that companies have to report against 5 different categories of water, and there's much more of an emphasis on financial accounting within the legislation. Would that be fair?
That is actually fair enough. That it is more in depth, and you have to provide more detailed information when it comes to reporting about different information. So if in case you speak of water, there are, like you mentioned, there are 5 aspects that they have to go ahead and report about. Apart from that, when it comes to embracing circularity, they also emphasize on what is the waste that's generated within the organization, what amount is recovered or recycled. Based on that, how have you disposed of the rest of it? So it's more kind of a detailed information. When we speak of well-being, what kind of features or what kind of facilities are you providing for your employees? And till what extent of a turnover, or maybe for your finances, do you go ahead and provide certain facilities to the employees? That's kind of the aspect that BRSR and BRSR Core also focuses on. So if I have to say, yes, it is kind of more focused framework, wherein gives a more broader view of what the organization does towards its social aspects or governance aspects. For that matter, if I speak about diversity in the boardroom, that's also a part of a requirement that they have to go and report upon. So yes, in one way, BRSR is a very good step taken up by SEBI, wherein it's asking companies to get aligned with certain frameworks that are used globally. Yeah. Also helps them to go ahead and keep themselves prepared for an open market when it comes to a global trade, and that kind of helps companies to go and develop themselves as well, if in case they've not done it yet. That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
And do you think, if I think back over times visiting India, corporate social responsibility has been something that's been for a long time. A lot of organisations have reported on CSR topics for years. Do you think that those organisations are still struggling with, so the listed companies, are they still finding that transition? They may have been reporting under GRI or something else. Are they still finding challenges in terms of collecting some of the information for reporting?
Now, BRSR being part, or you can say it is developed based on GRI and other such standards. So it seems to me like it is quite comfortable for big organizations to go ahead and have that information available, since they have the resources and the facilities to go ahead and collect such sort of data at such extent. But if you go to see of the next part, that's the BRSR Core. When you speak of the core, it's moreover about scope 3 for the organization when they have to report it within their BRSR report. So when it comes to scope 3, they're looking out towards their supplier, their value chain partners. Now, value chain partners won't be that huge for every organization listed company, if you have to say for 1,000 listed companies. So when it comes to the top 250 or so as well, the current reporting one that they have to report, the companies that are involved for the BRSR Core are pretty medium sized, you can say, or small companies, and having such resource allotted just for this, for the reporting aspect or for collection of the data, kind of gets a little hassle for the organizations, and they find it difficult to go ahead and have that information. Even if they have it, there is a slight sense of reluctance to go ahead and provide it in the open forum for the public domain. For the matter, if I have to just speak of an example that we had with one of our customer, wherein he was pretty, the customer was pretty open saying that for posh cases, let's take posh cases as an example. If in case there are any reported posh cases, a company would not want that out in the open when it comes to reporting in such angle. The fear here is that if in case this is out in the open, they may lose business, they may avoid be on the negative side of a crowd for joining the organizations, because it's reputational based. Yes, reputational based, it kind of hampers their reputation as well. That's one aspect to it. The other part is some sort of financial information as well, wherein they are not comfortable disclosing what sort of trades they take or what sort of traders are they involved with, to what extent they are involved with such traders, whether it's the dealers or distributors. So such are angles, even bifurcation for the matter of, if in case I am trading with I'm dealing with multiple companies, how would I know whether they are traders, they are retailers, or they are just single person owned companies? So having that information or having that resource to go ahead and collect that sort of information is kind of difficult when it comes to smaller organizations. The larger ones do have their resources for getting such information, and they have assistance as well when required. They can go ahead and invest in such projects. But for smaller companies, I do think that this is kind of something that is difficult for them. And also, since SEBI, they do not come under the jurisdiction for SEBI when it comes to reporting such thing, it gets kind of on a negligent side that the company may just say, it's a requirement for you. Yes, you're a listed company. I'm a private company, non-listed public company. I don't need to report or even for the matter collect such sort of data at that extent what is requested right now by SEBI. So that's one angle wherein there's a difficulty that the listed company faces as well when it comes to collecting such data from their supply chain.
And I think something you mentioned that people in Europe or in other countries wouldn't realise is that, and I only learnt it relatively recently, is that when organisations in India refer to Scope 3, they're not referring specifically to carbon data and greenhouse gas, they're referring to the value chain, the supply chain, and everything that's incorporated within that. I think what you're saying in terms of organisations that maybe don't have to report but are being requested to provide the information is kind of, it's a challenge as old as time, because you're asking effectively, you have to comply with this piece of legislation, but to comply with it, we need to make companies comply with us to provide the information to then report on an annual basis. In terms of, I know when we spoke to a company earlier this week, they said that they were starting to write into their contracts that you need to be able to provide this information to us, or then there will be problems. How do you see companies being able to leverage, not just like using like a stick, but how can you encourage companies potentially to provide some of that information? Because as you've said, if you're smaller, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for some of the bigger companies already, let alone those that are then, you have somebody that's trying to speak to their CFO who they maybe never have spoken to before, or HR team that they maybe don't even know who it is. Is there anything like that you've heard, like changes to contracts or incentives that organisations have kind of used to try and help collect some of that information?
For now, if I have to answer to that, for now it is relatively new, so there are not much examples given out, but for sure, like you mentioned, one part of it being included within the contract. The other one, if you want to think of incentivizing it, that's one part is you can maybe provide them discounts when you have to go ahead and purchases for purchases or some sort of purchase orders that they're provided. And the other part is creating awareness at the early stage. That's one thing that maybe the listed companies may have lagged behind, most of them I can say, because they're not yet prepared or even having a word with their supply chain or the value chain partners to make them understand or make them aware that this is part of the requirement that will be coming down to you today or tomorrow. You may think it's too early for you, but it's better to start early than cause a blunder.
And I think, but that's another challenge as old as time, because again, if I like shift it slightly to look at the EU or other pieces of legislation, the amount of conversations I have with organisations, legislation doesn't just appear, as you know. Like SEBI have had several consultations. You don't wake up in the morning and all of a sudden you have to report under something. And what I've seen in Europe is that companies they see the legislation, but they think, it's fine. Like, it's 3 years away, we don't need to worry about it. And then what happens is it gets closer and it gets closer. It's a headache if it's your own company, like BRSR, because if you're a multinational, you have several operations, it's hard. But as soon as you add Core into it, then it's even harder to collect that information. And you could argue that actually, like you said, you probably need to communicate even earlier, because you're trying to encourage or engage supply or the value chain to provide information that they may not even be required to provide normally.
Yeah, that's right, because right now, speaking on the same lines, right now SEBI has just asked it to be more of comply and explain aspect, and the companies have still not communicated this part to their to the value chain partners, and not even asked them to go ahead and start preparing in advance. If you have to have this information, since we've got our financial year starting from March and April, March, and ending in the same aspect, there are companies that reported quite close. I mean, they have got a gap that they need to close in within, have to start reporting or maybe complete their reporting within that certain time. Now, having your value chain partners go ahead and try to accumulate such a massive data information in that span of that duration, it just won't be possible. So maybe having them prepared from the early stage, having them notified that if in case we would require this data, there's no point of if in case sort of thing. It is required, so we would request you to go ahead and have that, and maybe send it over to us, or maybe have an arrangement wherein that data is collected at a certain point and then collated at the end of the year, and you can have a proper report rather than being in a rush around to try to collect the remaining pending information and then try to create a report out of it, which would not be accurate, to be honest, because you would not have that kind of depth or that kind of accurate data from the value chain partner.
And I guess the explain bit, that becomes a bit of a cop-out potentially, where if you haven't carried out some of those important activities engaging with the value chain earlier on, you're going to have to spend a lot of time explaining instead of demonstrating that you've got those compliant processes in place. In terms of, like, obviously your background as well as the compliance angle through audit as well, how do you see the elements in terms of audits that you undertake? How do you see the alignment between things SEBI are asking their listed companies to collect within the value chain and some of the audits that you've delivered? Are the topics similar in terms of the information that they're requesting, or would you say that there's a difference?
When it comes to the audits, yeah, we do have much similarity, but when it comes to the audit that I've conducted, was more over when it comes to quality related or health and safety related. These are more about financial related information. So not exactly financial, but something related to how exactly are they functioning, and you can say there is similarity a lot between them, because there are POSH related information that we look out for. We do see about well-being of the employees. Apart from that, we see safety related information that's also included in the BRSR Core. So there is quite a similarity, and I would really appreciate the fact that SEBI has rolled this out as a requirement, because there is a notion here in the Indian cultural, you can say, community, wherein unless something is forced on them, it's quite difficult for them to take that step forward.
Okay, so voluntary reporting or something.
Voluntary reporting is something that is required, and that is something I think that is required to be taken up by the government. Unless the government bodies force it on you, you would not want to go ahead and do it upfrontly. So that understanding and that cultural understanding has to undergo a change. That's when, because you need to have that understanding that if today you want to expand, or you want to go ahead and flourish in the market, you would definitely be looking out to different markets. So for the matter, if in case today you're dealing in India, you would definitely want to approach the European market, and that would have CSDD, like you mentioned, or CSRD, and if you go to the US, you've got CBAM and other such reporting frameworks. So SEBI has gone ahead and has those, inculcated those frameworks and created the BRSR and BRSR Core. So it's not much different to what's going on in the West as well, in the market, in other markets as well. So it kind of helps you develop your company when it comes to such reporting frameworks. And also in the other aspect, you would have, I personally feel, you would be at peace of mind that, okay, if what you're doing doesn't hamper the environment, doesn't hamper my employees, you would have a happy workforce, and a happy workforce definitely brings profit. Yeah. So no matter what way you work around, at the end you're going to be having that financial gain. So it's better to have a quick start, an early start, helping you going ahead and developing your company throughout the way.
I think the bit about profit is obviously an interesting one, because Jake and I were talking about obviously there's the right thing to do, but also there's financial incentives with doing it. In terms of, with this being like financially linked legislation and reporting, a lot of your conversations we've had this week with clients who have been with their finance teams, accountants, CFOs and things like that. How do you what's the challenge there? Because I think that that's fine for things like carbon, definitely, because it's a numbers thing. How do you see it in terms of organisations and how well they're coming together with the multiple stakeholders? Because the CFO of a company or the financial director will not necessarily know how many 𝗵ощ cases there are or how many health and safety accidents there have been within the organisation. So they're going to have to rely on several people and teams to be able to pull that data together. Do you see that as being, I know in Europe we see that as being a challenge. Do you see is that a challenge here as well?
Exactly, it's the exact challenge here as well, because I have spoken to clients and they have mentioned that, you know, having the heads of different departments in one meet is a complete challenge that they go ahead and face, because getting that time for that information in order to go ahead and have that meet together and collect the information is a difficult task for each and every one of them. Being about more cooperative is another challenge. Like if in case I have to say for the time to be given out for such a task, I don't find, or I've come across situations wherein the person I speak to says that they don't find it productive when it comes to such information. I mean, it's something that they can calculate, and it's more based on calculation based. Yes. So having that, they'll just hand over a document, and the person who's trying to fill the regulatory requirement is going ahead and, you know, having a tough time trying to calculate the information, and it would have been easier if the person had some assistance. Yeah. So it is kind of a challenge here as well, wherein going to multiple departments, be it HR or financial or health and safety or environmental for the matter, having them provide the information as required, that is kind of a challenge. Even to have that understanding, like I mentioned, is a task for the smaller companies. They do understand, they've heard the terminology of scope 1 and scope 2 and so on and so forth, but they're not quite aware of what would be included within that. So a kind of awareness as well, the knowledge for it is also a task and a challenge for them, wherein what would be required, what is the emission factor, these are certain things that they are not quite aware about, and you know, it would be a help if in case they are, you know, published maybe along with your reporting framework, you need to go ahead and collate using this information.
Yeah, so this is how,
a sort of guide for them,
guidance.
So they can go ahead and help.
And I think that's a big difference between SEBI approach and the EU, like 𝗵𝗏. So 𝗵𝗏 have got, there's more guidance than you could read in terms of the different bits and pieces. When I look at, when I take a look at the SEBI guidelines and SEBI guidance, it's actually relatively limited in terms of the amount of information and the interpretation of it. So it is really tough.
That's the next part of it, yeah.
And I think, like, for organisations that you're trying to work with, rightly or wrongly, a lot of the time these kind of responsibilities get passed down to somebody because CFO's too busy, other people are too busy, so it ends up on somebody's desk that doesn't understand what some of these terminology is, which again, this year you would say probably creates a lot of challenges. Possibly later years it becomes more of a cycle, like an annual financial report, that some of that information is available, you would hope. I wonder, in terms of how you see it progressing, obviously there's consultations out at the moment. Is there anything, what do you expect to see in terms of BRSR Core? Do you think this is where this is it now, or do you see it getting easier? I know there's consultation about the assurance process and independent assurance providers. Do you see any changes to try and alleviate some of the pressures that companies are probably no doubt reporting to SEBI?
Yes, I do actually, to be honest, because the early on when SEBI came in with the disclosures for their scope 3, or you say value chain partners, they had come up with 75%. And then they reduced it down right now based on the consultation papers and the suggestions that were provided by the listed companies. They've reduced it down to 2%.
Yeah, so massive.
Yeah, it's a massive drop. So yeah, that eases out for the time being, but that sense of understanding has to be developed that it may be 2% now, but for sure, if in case you start your process early, like I've been repeating myself, if you start if you start the process early, there's not going to be a challenge when it comes to be it 2% or be it 75%. Yeah. The other part is about the understanding of the value chain partner as well, that you report today, it'll help you go and put it into practice. Yeah. You can put it into practice, and once it develops into a habit, there's not going to be a challenge anymore. You know what you have to find, where you're going to get it, and how soon you're going to get it. Like how each company would do their financial audits. Yeah. Since it's a requirement, it's a mandatory requirement, people are, the organization is getting it done. The auditors are getting it done without a hassle. They're doing their internal audits. If they have to get certified, they're preparing themselves accordingly. So you can take this as a positive note that this is going to be part of your daily routine. It's going to be an annual routine. So you start preparing early, start collecting early, and have that ready. If you don't have the knowledge, maybe start developing on it. Take assistance, take guidance from some sort, and you can go ahead and have that information in line.
I think so. That Jake and I were chatting about it on another podcast, and I think it's really interesting how with the SEBI, with BRSR Core, it's done on a percentage basis, whereas obviously my view, if you were to look at other legislation in Europe, but also as a practitioner and probably your own, is I would be much happier with a risk-based approach to it. So not just looking at financial metrics, but also looking, well, do we want to select the suppliers, the half a dozen or a dozen suppliers that are the biggest, or do we want to be looking at the ones that are most, that present a highest risk because of environmental issues or social issues? But it doesn't really work like that with BRSR.
It actually doesn't. They're just right now they just focus on the top 2%. It doesn't give the idea of what would be the highest risk suppliers. Yeah. So that's something. Yeah, I would agree that they should be working on, and maybe that is where the impact will be.
Because if you're only looking at that top 2%, the risk could be, as you and I know, the risk could be buried deeper in smaller suppliers. And if you're looking at it from a sustainability risk perspective, there's also the risk that you're not reporting that information. So investors are saying, oh, it's fine, like these companies look okay. Yes. But that's only because the companies that they're requesting the information from are multinationals in their own right, potentially with a reduced risk because of the arrangements that they have in place.
Correct. That would be absolutely correct, because the top 2% would be the ones that you're trading with, and they have the capacity to go ahead and maybe have the resources, and you can have that sort of information collected at the right point of time. But they would have the minimum risk, because they won't be catering to just a single company, listed company. Since they are on the top 2% for a listed company, for the matter, they would definitely be catering to other such companies as well.
And I guess that kind of leads into last thing to sort of discuss today, and I mentioned it at the start. So it's that data accuracy to prevent greenwashing. I would argue it's easier to be more accurate if you're contacting those biggest companies to request information. A lot are likely to have to, like we were chatting about earlier, are likely to have to be sharing the information between them, because a lot of them are customers to each other or value chain partners to each other. How do you see the challenges in terms of the accuracy? So for those smaller businesses that are being asked to provide information, do you see that there being a risk with the granularity of BRSR? Unless you're one of the big organisations, there's potentially a risk there to do with the quality of the information that's being provided and the accuracy of it?
Yes, I would agree to that. The accuracy is a question right now at the moment, because the point is that when it comes to reporting the BRSR core within an organization's BRSR report, like you mentioned, it's just a percentage. Something that to be honest, we've also had a conversation with an irate value chain partner who mentioned that if you're forcing us to go and do something we are not required to do, like SEBI, we do not come under the jurisdiction, like I mentioned, we can just go ahead and provide you any sort of data. Yeah. How would you validate that? That's a question that they did pose, and there was no response to it, because that just escalated the conversation. And it does, SEBI has come out, is still in talks with regards to changing the assurance part to assessment. Okay. That's one manner maybe you can go ahead and have that information validated and have the accuracy of the information that you're providing to.
Which I think it will get to a point where you'll have to, because otherwise, as we've discussed earlier, if you're a company that doesn't have to do it, you feel like you're being made to comply because you work for a big organisation.
I can just provide it.
Yeah, exactly. You turn around to me and you say, that's fine, I'll provide the information, and you're just writing rubbish to get through the process as quickly as possible.
Correct.
I think my view would be that, without some form of formal assessment, even if it's done on a sampling basis, you're really going to struggle to ensure that the information that those listed companies is presenting to their to the exchange, whether it's going to be accurate or not.
Right, it is, because if in case, unless there's some sort of third-party validation to the information that is provided, it's just as good as you provide anything you want.
Yeah,
without a backup, without information.
I guess the one way of catching that without assessment is that you would be looking at previous year's reports. So it won't be relevant for this year. But if you start to see wild inaccuracies between the value chain response in year one and year two, then you'll start to see that either the first year was accurate, probably most likely that the baseline wasn't accurate, and now they're starting to mature in the process.
Yeah, that's one way of having it. By looking at the trend or the changes in every year as compared to the base year, or the trend of every year's reporting, you can definitely go ahead and have that accuracy determined, but still unless an assessment or a third-party validation or certification that seals the deal that, okay, whatever is provided has been validated and verified, or audited for the matter. But yeah, greenwashing is one difficult aspect to deal with right now when it comes to any framework, if I have to be honest, in any framework, because we still can't make it certain as to what data could be, to what extent is it accurate, right? Unless you are on the floor working on it, that's when you know what exactly are you reporting about.
Especially if we refer to scope 3 as value chain and all the information that's collected in that. But Jason, thanks a lot for your time today. It's been great to discuss BRSR. I think that the challenges that organisations in India face, both with their own disclosure of their information but also the value chain, are really not dissimilar for the challenges that organisations in Europe are going to face, and in wider parts of APAC, Australia and things like that over time. So if anything, there's an opportunity for countries and organisations within countries to learn from each other in terms of what a better way of approaching disclosure and collecting information is. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks everybody for joining this version of the Achilles podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon.